here is a little map on how understanding the union of opposites is a gateway to clarity and prosperity, from a fried brain, chronically online, 23-year-old just starting to figure things out. The more that I learn and the more that I know is the more I realize how much I don't know. So use these as entry points to your own exploration into the intelligible realm. I am not a teacher or a master of these concepts, but here I go presenting them to you because what else do you do with free will and the internet? So we're going to start off with a quote by Carl Jung. The self is not only the center, but also the circumference, which unites the opposites. So we can see this, not only the center, but the circumference. So this is the self. Now this symbol might look familiar. This is a popular book going around right now, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And that symbol is a universal symbol for the sun and creation. Now we can look at the center being form, and this outer circumference being totality. And we can also see the center being the conscious elements of our psyche, and the totality being the infinite unconscious realm. Jung's definition of the conscious is our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors that we are actively aware of in day-to-day life. It's the ego. It's what directly takes form in your earthly experience. And the unconscious can be seen divided into two realms. So we have the personal unconscious, and then the collective unconscious. Our personal unconscious consists of what we aren't actively aware of and underpinning what we do, what we think, and how we feel. Memories that you've suppressed, suppressed fears, untapped potential within yourself. And the collective unconscious is sort of the built-in story of all of humanity. It consists of different archetypes like the hero, the sage, the wise man, the anima and animus, which we will be touching on later. The most basic union of opposites is, if you had the conversation with your parents, you know, it is the union of male and female. Now this little center part might look familiar, especially to the ladies. Here is how we experience the birth of the body. Procreation. Flip that around and we see another familiar shape. We got two on our head, an eye, or we can call it the birth of perception. Now we see the dance of the masculine and feminine play out in myths all across time and in so many different symbols. We see the masculine as the sun, feminine as the moon, masculine as the yang, feminine as the yin, masculine as the material, feminine as the spiritual. And this is fundamental to having a more whole perspective on what's going on in the world. This is literally how the fabric of the universe is created, of perception and of the body itself. And the main thing we're touching on today is understanding. And I think, especially in my generation, so much of our bewilderment is stemmed in this male and female union in relationships, aka our love lives are shit shows. But there's a reason that there have been lifetimes of love songs and movies and stories, myths, because there's this innate desire to explore the depth to which this union occurs and to give it form, give it words, and try to make sense of it. I butchered this little spiel the past 3 videos, so I wrote it down and I'm just going to read it. The union between male and female is the bedrock of creation, yet in modern times, especially with Gen Z, its true depth is often overlooked. Many focus solely on physical attraction or fleeting connections, ignoring the spiritual and emotional dimensions that make it sacred. For instance, the rise of casual dating and hookup culture dilutes the profound potential of a bond fully embraced. There's this pessimistic undertone regarding relationships in our generation. We've all been hurt, and we cling onto that hurt so tightly, relaying it back to that person, to new relationships, or poisoning ourselves with that disdain or insecurity. I hear the story over and over again about how someone so traumatized from a past relationship can't ever imagine opening themselves up to love again. But the lows we experience in relationships are a reflection of the immense power and necessity of this union. When valued for the miraculous experience that it is, of course there will be pain, but you can experience a love with an awareness that makes it worth every bit of that pain. And of course there will be hurdles, but you will be grounded in the knowing that this is a journey of fundamental human growth, and though difficult, the potential of union bears fruit beyond what we can imagine. So feel relief in that it is up to you. You have the opportunity through your own perception and awareness to build something beautiful with love, something that extends past your own personal fulfillment, but uplifts the world as a whole. Why rid ourselves of that opportunity through narrow frameworks of thinking, misplaced disdain, or over-attachment to the past? There is much healing to be done regarding the narratives around relationships. And so with that, regarding the narratives of relationships, let's get into the anima and the animus. The anima and the animus are archetypes in general. Any union concept really is such a deep, vast realm of knowledge that really I am only scratching the surface when I give you this little synopsis, so I do recommend delving into it in your own time, but here is a little introduction to what the anima and the animus is. So, here's this masculine and feminine union, right? The birth of all perception. So the anima is where the male unconscious meets the feminine. So remember, this is the unconscious realm. So it is where the male, not masculine, but male unconscious meets feminine aspects right here. And the animus is where masculine aspects meet the feminine unconscious. So, right here. So we can see the anima being in relation to emotions in a man, receptiveness, and bringing the spirit to the body. These are sort of positive qualities. Emotions is neutral, but, and then for the animus side, in a female, we can see this showing up as the realm of ideas, strength, and bringing the body to spirit. Oops, these are positive. So a positive example of a personified anima in a movie is Nala from The Lion King. In regards to bringing spirit to the body, Nala sort of unburies something in Simba's unconscious. She unburies this guilt and burden and made him realize that there is a deeper spiritual purpose for his existence on this planet, not to just dwell in these hedonistic pleasures and eat and play, there is something deeper out there for him, and sort of brings this emotional and spiritual compass back into his unconscious and back into his behaviors. And he's like, oh shit, I have a land to save, I have people that are counting on me, and bridges the gap from his unconscious to his conscious, and bridges the gap from his earthly action to his spiritual purpose. She brings that fire, that spirit, back into his body. And an animus example, the one I thought of was Flynn Rider from Tangled. And Rapunzel already sort of had that fire within her. She already had those dreams. She had that drive to read about the world and create art and to sing. And he gave her this opportunity to bring that spirit into an actual adventure on this earth. So for Nala, she sort of introduced to Simba this faith in purpose. And Flynn introduced to Rapunzel this faith in adventure. So Flynn sort of gave Rapunzel's fire a structure and a path, while Nala reignited that fire in general in Simba, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a bit of an example, but I'm going to read what's actually in Jung's Man and His Symbols. Now, this is mostly regarding dreams, but it delves into the anima and animus in general. So he talks about the positive qualities of an anima so beautifully. Whenever a man's logical mind is incapable of discerning facts that are hidden in his unconscious, the anima helps him to dig them out. Even more vital is the role that the anima plays in putting a man's mind in tune with the right inner values, and thereby opening the way into more profound inner depths. It is as if an inner radio becomes tuned to a certain wavelength that excludes irrelevancies but allows the voice of the great man to be heard. In establishing this inner radio reception, the anima takes on the role of the guide or mediator to the world within and to the self. Beautiful. And then for positive qualities of the animus, let's see here. On this highest level, he becomes, like the anima, a mediator of the religious experience whereby life acquires new meaning. He gives the woman spiritual firmness, an invisible inner support that compensates for her outer softness. The animus, in his most developed form, sometimes connects the woman's mind with the spiritual evolution of her age, and can thereby make her even more receptive than a man to new creative ideas. Okay, so yeah, I love the use of spiritual firmness and structure. And we see that masculine energy everywhere. Masculinity is symbolized by straight lines, and you can even see that in the shapes of their body, while feminine qualities are shaped by curves and sort of this open receptiveness, and you can see that in our body. It's just, you see these complementary opposites that exist in the internal world and external world everywhere when you start looking. And so for negative qualities of the anima, it's this vagueness, this kind of muddiness, the trap of desire. So we see that, we see this trap of desire and dreams in Greek mythology with sirens and using their beautiful voice to lure men out to their deaths, And then for the animus, it's obstinateness. So immovableness, rigidness in their beliefs, in your beliefs, and the trap of logic and reality. So one example I could come up with for this negative side of the anima and animus is in The Little Mermaid. The negative side would sort of be Ursula and how she tempts Ariel with dreams that are really just self-serving to Ursula, and it's like, you can have this and you can have that. And in the same movie, the trap of logic and reality is sort of symbolized by King Triton, her father, who imposes these strict rules on her and therefore dilutes their emotional connection and Ariel's ability to fully embrace the whole world around her. And though the anima and animus can be personified through individuals, like many teachings of a man's anima comes through the mother and a lover, and then same with the animus. For women, it comes through the father and our lover, and that's why we talk about mommy and daddy issues and how they always reflect onto our relationships. And you hear the notion of thinking you know yourself until you get into a relationship and it's holding up a mirror to a buried part of you that you just were never aware of. And a lot of the times it's because it's bringing out our inner animus and inner anima. You know, let's say in conflicts, I know when I have like conflicts with men, it's like, okay, but what do you mean? What do you mean? What are you feeling? And it's like I give these vague responses because sometimes it isn't so logical. It isn't so black and white. There isn't just an immediate solution. And then men will be like, I just don't understand. She says this, but says this, contradicts herself. She's just crying, but she doesn't know why. It's like there's so much friction between men and women right now because we keep viewing these opposites as something that clashes each other and something that cancels each other out and something to fight against each other, when not in all cases, but in most cases, they're complementary opposites, and they're ways for male logic to actually expand through emotion, and women's emotions to actually expand through intellect and logic. I definitely used to lean on a little bit of that toxic feminist ideology and saw all the opposing elements of a man as something against me and something to fight. And now, as I've started to understand men more, you know, their sexual desires and the intellectual foundation of their psyche, I'm able to communicate myself so much more clearly, and I'm able to let go of a lot of the hatred and the, I don't know, just division I had between myself and men. Because I see how these opposites work in this beautiful dance and how it actually helps me expand in my own psyche and perceptions. And yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of division and friction, and I think if we just take that extra step to begin understanding each other instead of fighting the things that we don't immediately experience, it can greatly improve our relationships with each other and our relationships with ourselves. Understanding the anima and animus is crucial because they represent the unconscious aspects of our psyche that we may not fully recognize or integrate. Relationships often act as mirrors, reflecting back the hidden parts of ourselves, those buried qualities that the anima or animus embodies. In romantic partnerships, we are challenged to confront these aspects, whether it's nurturing, intuitive qualities of the anima or assertive, logical traits of the animus. And by recognizing and integrating these forces, we can achieve greater self-awareness and balance, and in relationships have many more opportunities of growth and help us bring our unconscious parts of ourselves into the light. So like I said, you know, when that mirror is held in front of us, there is so much confusion. It's like, oh my God, what is going on? But at the same time, our biological compass is attuned for mating and procreation, and therefore like our loving relationships, our temperaments, our hormonal cycles, the shape of our bodies, our pullings, our desires, our visions. Everything is guided by this biological compass to survive and to procreate, and therefore find a mate and to be in love. And so while it's the source of so much of our bewilderment, at the same time, the ultimate union of opposite, or paradox, it's the one thing that makes sense. So it's interesting because this notion of making sense but being a source of such bewilderment in regards to relationships and love has been on my mind for a while. And I actually wrote a poem in my poetry book called Suzuki, which I'm going to read to you right now. And it's about the man I love. My life's epic mystery, yet the only thing that makes sense to me. My sweet contradiction, my puzzling man, you bend the bars of prison with the warmth of your hand. Your mind and mine intertwine in our own chaotic web, but those seconds where the waves pull us in, those soft seconds we forget. My calm wind and your violent seas whisper to let go as we run away together and conceive that we never really left home. And then it was put into words when I was watching this Michael Phillip video, who is who has a podcast called Third Eye Drops that is really, really good. And he did this breakdown of Plato's allegory of the cave. And an element of the allegory of the cave is the ultimate form of good. And he was like, the best way that I've been able to put the ultimate form of good into my own words is that it is the mystery that makes it all make sense. And it's interesting that there is a connection there with the ultimate form of good and romantic love, and how that light is the source of all creation. And anyway, so with that, another thing that's in my book is, in regards to the mystery, the more I surrender, the more I control. Now, there is so much science to back this, how presence and letting go of limiting beliefs open your life up to your desired reality and to manifestation, if you will. And this is sort of a whole other conversation, but I have been digging into the relationship and also the disconnect with New Age manifestation and traditional ideas about God's will, and how they sort of align, but in some ways they disconnect. Yeah, we're not really going to touch on that today, but it is interesting, and I do think there is this sort of direction that New Age manifestation is going toward hedonism, but at the same time, I think we have these innate desires for a reason, and I think a lot of the times they do coincide with the greater story and God's will, if you will. From personal experience, I realize when I get into these thought spirals of worry, there's a voice in the back of our head saying, like, this is what we need to do to figure things out. You know, if I just worry about this thing enough, if I give that worry enough of my attention, I'll figure it out and it won't manifest. When actually giving it that focus, giving it that attention is only giving more power to the worry and not to the solution. And here's some science to back that. When you enter calm and meditative states, you enter states of alpha, brainwave states of alpha and theta. And and when you're in high stress environments, you are in higher waves of beta, and that's also just your day to day. But yeah, so this is a very deep meditative state, and this is kind of just a calm. Alpha is more a common calm. And there is so many different studies to support this, but I'm just going to bring up a couple examples. Presence, meditation, and mindfulness is the gateway to these states. Presence, obviously, is surrender. It's becoming the non-judgmental observer of all that's going on. In the alpha and theta brainwave states, your cortisol production lowers. Now, cortisol is really important, but it is the stress hormone. So everything in moderation, right? It is important for problem solving and adaptation skills of a human, but when it gets too high, our body just destroys itself. Lower cortisol activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, it creates a more relaxed state in the body and creates a more favorable environment for BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, I believe. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Yeah, production, which this is super important for cognitive function and cognitive flexibility. So higher brain function in problem solving, emotional regulation, memory, learning, and therefore creativity. BDNF is a protein that promotes the growth of new neurons and the strengthening of existing neural pathways in your brain. So neurogenesis, which I love this word because, I mean, this means to create new neurons, but, you know, the more I surrender, the more I control. To control is to have, again, access to that creative field. And it's like your brain is literally connecting itself to the action of creation, neurogenesis. And then synaptic plasticity, which means to strengthen the bonds that are already there or encourage new connections between neurons to develop. Again, to regulate your body, your internal world in general, and therefore your health, is going to reflect outwardly into your external circumstance. And so, on the flip side, when you are in states of chronic stress, that means your cortisol levels are high, but they are not lowering because your hippocampus, which is also a vital center for cognitive function in general, for memory and learning, but it also is the sort of referee that calls out to the HAP, the hypothalamic adrenal pituitary axis, to send out more cortisol or not, or to stop the production. And so when you're in chronic levels of cortisol production or stress, your hippocampus becomes damaged, so it's not really able to tell the levels of cortisol in your body, but it also just becomes desensitized. You know, the production is happening over and over and over, and your body is not meant to be in that chronic state of stress. It's just like, dude, what is going on? I'm so sick of this shit, like whatever. That's what your hippocampus says. So the HAP axis is like, well, boss isn't telling me anything, so let's keep sending that cortisol my girl's way, you know? And then and then it's just this toxic feedback loop where then it creates more cortisol, desensitizes the hippocampus even more. The HAP axis, like, all right, boss is not even picking up anymore, and so boom, more cortisol. And so this impairs your brain function tremendously, and we see how surrender actually scientifically gives your body this sense of control. It gives you this greater hold on your internal world and therefore your external world, and how the opposite puts you in this survival state that closes you off from reaching into that creative potential and exploring the imagination, because your body is just trying to survive and not kill itself. Like I said, again, presence is the gateway to this creative hand. So here's the paradox of what's to come. What you create with this control comes through or is what's here. Presence. So this paradox is seen biblically in Luke 17:21 and Matthew 6:10. The kingdom of God is within you, and thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So the kingdom is coming. The light is already present, it just has not been fully realized. The crystallization of light So the crystallization of light is dependent on awareness, perception. And the last little example we're going to talk about today, going back to science, is wave-particle duality shown in the double-slit experiment. Here's a rough depiction. So light was seen to be a wave, and so when light was sent out by single units of photons through double slits, it was expected to look like this, the one I'm drawing right now. Real bright in the middle and gets more dim toward the end. Even though that's dark, that's meant to be more light. So it's more light in the middle because it's more concentrated. It's acting as a wave, bouncing off of each other when it passes through the slits. But, like I said, when they measured the singular photons of light, it actually acted as a particle, which was surprising. because light was thought to be a wave. But then what they realized is, hold on, when they took off the measuring units of the photons at the slits and just kept them up on the screen, so the photons did not know that they were being measured, so the photons were unobserved, they actually took on wave properties. So this gives light superposition, which means it is not either or, it does not succumb to the human models that we have created, particles and waves, but it actually holds both. And how it shows up is dependent on how we focus in on it, how we measure it, / our perception and our awareness of it. So that's just a little scientific example of how the nature of things may seem opposing or contradictory, but really it's just the narrow framework of our human mind that makes it so. We are a society that is addicted to labels and boxes. We have to have this foundational level of humble open-mindedness because we do not have it all figured out. And how do corrupted powers keep their control over people? They create a framework in which the people divide up themselves. And so whether it is through men and women, left and right, religion and science, always keep a level of, again, humble open-mindedness to it all. We are united in this division, and we have this journey of unity to embark on together. I'm gonna leave off this lesson or map of entry points, if you will, with this Jung quote that I really love. That is why I say to any beginner, learn your theories as well as you can, but put them aside when you touch the miracle of the living soul. Not theories, but your own creative individuality alone must decide. So, it's nice to have these elements of the intelligible realm in our toolkit as we move through life, but just because you added a hammer to your toolkit does not mean you're going to be hammering your way through life. Like I said, understanding the union of opposites and understanding in general is a gateway to clarity and prosperity. And though it may help the gates open, we still must walk. We still must just experience life. Like I said at the beginning, this is an exploration. And when you explore, you are not meant to stay there. You are just meant to add those experiences to the toolkit and move onwards. So thank you for watching. This whiteboard is so fun. I'm so excited to use it to dive deeper into other topics and also make videos that are just fun too. Like, this is definitely not all me. This is not all that I am diving into these theories and, again, the intellectual realm. Like, sometimes I just want to talk about my favorite movies and my honey turmeric mask that's changing my life. You know what I mean? Love you all. Take life seriously, lighthearted. It is not our battleground, but our playground, and we must rise above that fear mentality if we are to truly come together and put these theories to use. I love you so much.